Yo guys, like all other assists in F1 22, ABS is designed to make the game more enjoyable, especially if you're struggling to brake without locking your wheels. It will make braking easier, but it will make your lap times slightly slower. It's an extremely helpful and widely used assist. It allows the game to completely look after your brakes to avoid any lockups at all, allowing you to focus entirely on the racing. However, ABS will cause your lap time to be slower than your maximum potential. This is because the ABS kicks in when you're braking too heavily, which elongates your braking zones, forcing you to brake ever so slightly earlier than you ideally would. Disabling ABS in F1 22 can be a tricky assist to overcome. It's tricky because you need to relearn how to brake to avoid locking your wheels. The reason why ABS will slow you down is because it will temporarily lower the amount of brake pressure applied if it detects your wheels are about to lock up. As the ABS system releases the amount of pressure to avoid lockups, it makes you take longer to slow your car down. Learning to drive without ABS and controlling this brake pressure manually will almost certainly make your lap times faster. The key to driving without ABS enabled is to learn how to modulate your brake pressure at different speeds. The first thing you've got to try to remember is that your brakes are much more sensitive at lower speeds. If you apply the same amount of braking force at 100 miles an hour compared to 180 miles an hour, the chances of locking a wheel are much higher. Think of braking as a curve that falls away. At the start of the braking zone, you can apply 100% brake pressure. You'll keep this level of pressure maintained until just before the brakes would start to lock. Then you start to gradually release the brake pedal until you no longer have any brake pressure applied at all. This is normally always the quickest way to brake in F1 22. The second thing to learn is how your brake pressure and steering input are heavily linked. Your tyres can only provide so much grip. As you brake in a straight line, all of that grip is focused on slowing your car down. As you turn into a corner, the grip is then focused on turning. If you do both at the same time, you'll start to overload your tyre. And if you exceed this maximum amount of grip your tyre can provide, one of two things will happen. You'll either lock a wheel, which is normally the inside front tyre, as that's the one with the least amount of load in it. Or secondly, you'll understeer into the corner, making you miss the apex and run out wide. But to truly maximise your lap time, you will need to brake and turn at the same time into some corners, which is called trail braking. I'm going to talk about trail braking a little bit later in this video. If you want to skip right there, use the timestamps in the description below. When learning how to brake without ABS, we first need to learn the basics of braking. The first tip is to always brake in a straight line. As I mentioned earlier, if you apply any steering input while braking, this will take away from the maximum tyre grip that can be used to slow your car down. Steering while braking will not only increase the likelihood of locking a wheel, it will also make your braking zones longer, even if you don't lock up. Secondly, always remember your braking point. Locking up normally happens for two reasons. The first is that you're simply asking too much of the tyres, such as braking and turning at the same time, and the second is when drivers brake slightly too late. In this second scenario, drivers tend to panic and apply more brake pressure for longer than they normally would to try to compensate for braking too late. This will put more strain on your tyres and could potentially cause a lockup, especially if you're already driving close to the limit. This can be much less of an issue if you always look out for your braking zones as you approach them. Keep your eyes focused as far in front of you as you can to spot your brake reference points and try not to be too distracted from other things around you. Even when battling with other cars in F1 22, try to keep one eye on the braking point for the corner ahead. And then when you do come to slow the car down, you should always modulate your brake pressure. As I mentioned earlier, as you slow down, you need to start releasing the brake pressure. If you keep 100% brake pressure applied while you're slowing, there will be a point at which your tyres lock. You should aim to try to find the point where you're likely to lock a wheel, either through force feedback or vibration in your controller and through previous experiences, and then start to release the brake pedal just before you reach this point. Continue to release the brake pedal as you slow further until you've slowed enough to take the corner, at which point you should be applying no brake input at all. There are a few advanced braking techniques which you can learn in F1 22 which will help your lap times get better. And the first one I want to touch on is trail braking, which I mentioned earlier. This is the art of modulating your brake pressure along with your steering input. You'll start to apply steering lock before you fully release the brake pedal, which will reduce your overall amount of time you spend in a corner and should improve your lap times. To trail brake in F122, approach the corner in a straight line as you normally would and brake hard while travelling straight. Then, start to release your brake pressure just before your turning point. Start applying steering input to turn into the corner whilst further releasing the brake pedal. At the apex of the corner, you should be fully off the brake pedal and be ready to accelerate. And then you can accelerate as early as you can while drifting out to the opposite side of the track. My next advanced tip is to learn how to cadence brake, which is sometimes called stutter braking. This is extremely helpful during low grip scenarios. For example, cadence braking is extremely useful in heavy rain or when your tyres are incredibly worn out. Essentially, cadence braking involves you pumping the brake pedal reasonably quickly during the braking zone. This involves pushing and releasing the brake pedal over and over while you're slowing down. While it may seem counterintuitive to release the brake pedal while slowing, during extreme low grip scenarios, any sustained heavy braking pressure can cause your wheels to lock. By constantly releasing and reapplying the brake pedal, you're almost resetting the brakes each time. You brake heavily to slow the car, then release the brakes just before the wheels lock and repeat. You won't use cadence braking overly much during regular races, however it is extremely effective during extreme wet races or times when your tyres are extremely worn. Now you have my top tips for learning to brake without ABS enabled in F122. Just remember that ABS is one of the harder assists to turn off, so when you do, don't be disheartened if it takes a little while to adjust to braking without it. Over time, braking without ABS will become second nature, and you'll be able to focus more on improving lap time along with other techniques. If any part of this video has been helpful, please drop this video a like as that will really help this channel grow. And please leave me a comment below and let me know how you get on. I do read every comment that I receive and I'll try to answer as many as I can. If you like this style of content, subscribe to our channel as I'll be releasing a lot more F122 content over the coming days and weeks. But for now guys, I'll see you on track.